Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to another Insights from Women Leaders event. My name is Rola Kaakeh, I'm the CEO of Salus Vitae Group, and I'll be the host for the event. Now, welcome back to those that have joined us in previous events, and a special welcome to for those that are joining us for the first time. Now, a little background on the Insights from Women Leaders series. We launched this series in October of 2020 as a platform to hear from women leaders with varied backgrounds and perspectives on the topics of leadership, addressing current and future challenges, what skills we need moving forward, and how their experiences have shaped their outlook. The goal is to learn from women thought leaders and decision makers to empower current and future leaders, both men and women, to positively impact their organizations and communities. Now, diversity of thought, experiences, industry, education, and training is important to us, as it highlights the mosaic of perspectives that are represented in different settings that help drive decision-making and positive change. Now, our guests have included leaders from across the world, from various prestigious and reputable institutions, and their backgrounds, again, have been very diverse, their accomplishments many, and the insights and perspectives they provided have been extremely valuable. I encourage everyone to check out the recordings of all of our previous guest leaders if you haven't already done so. They're all available on our website. Now, for those that are returning to the series, you know the drill. Over the course of an hour, we ask our guest leader a number of questions. I will start first, and then we'll actually open it up to the audience questions. So if you have any questions, please submit them in the Q&A box, which is at the bottom or however it is located on your Zoom screen. Or you can also send your question in the chat, which will go to the panelists, but we prefer the Q&A box. Now, we also encourage you both during and after the event to post any takeaways that you have. You can post them in the Q&A box, in the chat, and on various social media platforms. And feel free to tag us at Salus Vitae Group so we can see how you benefited from the various insights and experiences of our distinguished guests. Now, this session is recorded and available for replay after the event. So let's go ahead and get started. Today's guest leader is actually joining us again from a previous series that we had done, From Vaccine to Vaccination. But today, she's joining us for the Insights from Women Leaders event. And our guest leader today is Dr. Catherine Duggan. Dr. Duggan is the Chief Executive Officer of the International Pharmaceutical Federation. She is responsible for visionary leadership, support, development, and advocacy, as well as growth across the 150 member organizations and the 4 million members that the FIP represents. She's responsible for developing and delivering the strategy, planning, and working across global organizations, such as the World Health Organization, the United Nations, and other international professional groups. In 2019, she chaired the World Professions Health Alliance, which represents 31 million health professionals across medicine, nursing, dentistry, physiotherapy, and pharmacy. She also signed the FIP MOU with the World Health Organization in May 2019 at the World Health Assembly meeting, which consolidates the collaboration and secures how pharmacy contributes to primary healthcare to deliver universal health coverage. She was awarded an honorary professorship from the School of Pharmacy, University of Nottingham. She has been awarded fellowships of both the RPS and the University College of London School of Pharmacy, and is a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts. In November of 2020, she was awarded the APSTJ Nagai International Women Scientist Award in 2021 on behalf of the Academy of Pharmaceutical Science and Technology, Japan. Welcome, and we're so happy that you're joining us today for this event.
Oh, thank you so much, Rola. I'm so excited to be with you again today. Wonderful.
Well, I'm so excited about this conversation. We mentioned earlier, I loved our conversation previously. So this is an exciting opportunity to address different topics that aren't necessarily related to the vaccination process. Now, with this series, we always ask our guest leaders the same question, especially as we start. And going through your bio and everything, and these are just only snapshots of what we've seen of your career. But you personally, as you self-reflect, did you expect to be where you are today?
Oh, really, it's so interesting, isn't it? When someone reads out your mini biog and you start thinking, oh my goodness, did I do that? Did I get that? How did I get that? So when you ask, did you expect to get where you are today? I can honestly put my hand on my heart and say, not at all. When I started out in my career, I had no idea or intention that I would be in this position. But also, I would just say, I think that really helps. And I mentor quite a few people early in their careers, and many of them want to set out their path for their entire career right at the start. And I think that's almost like defining a journey before you even know your destination. And if you and I were to think back about a journey of any sort, it's a mixture of timing and luck and opportunity taking and the support you have. And if you've got the right mixture at a right point in time, the opportunity facing you provides you with a feeling of positives rather than negatives. And that means you will take it. And then if you take an opportunity and it works for you, that's super. And the other point is, if you take an opportunity and it doesn't work for you, it's okay. You can also change direction. So having this fixed point at the end of your career, I think, is less helpful. And for the youngsters in our profession, I really think they've got such a long time in their careers now, and life is so different, that if they set a point as a point of success, I don't think that's going to help particularly. I must just make one point though. I think probably more as I'm in this role, I just absolutely feel blessed and privileged to be the chief exec of the International Pharmaceutical Federation, because I get such an opportunity to work with amazing colleagues, not just in my team, but actually across countries and across the profession, across the globe. And Rola, you get encounters like we've had, which really spark joy and really spark inspiration in you. And that's something that I truly feel blessed to have.
I actually like also that perspective, because you're not just thinking about you yourself in terms of your career, but where it's positioned you to surround you. Because I often think about that as well, is that not just what maybe I have accomplished or seen other people, but now the environments that you're in, or the circles that you've been able to meet of very interesting people, that is also very exciting, right? Because it fuels that ability and that gratitude actually that you mentioned, which is obvious in how you're talking, I think makes it a little bit exciting and humbling. From your response, it seems very humbling in the sense that everything that you've done, you don't take for granted the types of the work and the effort and the environment that you're in and the people that you're surrounded by, which is amazing.
I think that's lovely, that observation. But I would say probably, I think that is naturally my way. But I think in the time of COVID, you are feeling grateful and humble. I haven't had to go out onto the front line every day. And I am just grateful to be in my position and to watch my profession flourish during the time of such awful and terrible stress in our societies. So I feel it very acutely right now. And I just want to share that with you, even though we're screen to screen as opposed to face to face.
Yeah. And that's powerful too, because the ability to be thankful that you can contribute in different ways, given our current reality. I think oftentimes many of us have to kind of reevaluate, because we often assume, how can we contribute given certain situations? And this past year has not been normal for anybody. So I think that there's so much power in that. So for the next kind of set of questions, we tend to first go into the future as we kind of talk about what's next. And as you even look into your own career, into your own future, have you thought about what you want in your future, or really what do you want your legacy to be?
It's
a
such
simple
a good question. It's such a good question. But I think it also comes at a point in my life where, I've reached a certain level of maturity, and I'm also in a role of huge responsibility. And as I mentioned to you, probably when you apply for a position and you take the position, you've got more urgent things to think through. You've got to do the job on the first day, and you've got to get up to speed quickly. As you grow in the job, you get an opportunity to really start reflecting. And, I'm the first female CEO of the Federation in a profession that is high majority of women. So not only to women, but to men as well, I really feel like I need to be a role model. And that keeps me in check. That keeps me thinking about, how am I coming across? And I suppose that's something about legacy, isn't it, Rola? It's about how do I want to act? And you'd normally say, well, I want to act with integrity. I want to be good. I want to be known to be good. But I also think there's something about professional legacy and personal legacy. And I thought about this a little bit, and I thought, you know, of course, I want to be known that I deliver, and I deliver perhaps in times of stress, and that, you know, I enable delivery through my team and through the networks of our volunteers to achieve the vision that we have for FIP. But actually, really, if you think about the vision for FIP, is a world where everyone benefits from access to safe and affordable and effective medicines, blah, blah, blah. Could that be more appropriate for the times we're living in? So I get this drive about me, and I think I really have a lot to do, and I have a lot to support. And in doing so, I need to enable and support and empower through inclusion, equity, and advancement. And those are words that are really, really, I'll probably keep coming back to those because they've become increasingly important in the past year in particular. But my personal legacy, and I think this is a little nugget of advice, when you go through management training or leadership training, and you even get, you know, coached by a boss, or you get mentored, people will tell you that you need to act in a certain way, and you need to almost put on an act to be a leader and to progress through your career. And I found that very difficult. I work hard in my profession. I spend a lot of time in pharmacy, and I'm married to a pharmacist, and we talk a lot about the profession. And if I'm going to have a Catherine that's a pharmacist and a Catherine who's another Catherine, that will exhaust me. And really, I'm an extrovert as well, so I can't package it up as easily as perhaps somebody else might. So I've striven to kind of get this balance between being me, that I want people to know, and also not being too much me, so that I'm not driving people too mad, or that I'm not exposing myself to weaknesses and vulnerability. And that's my little balance that I like to play. I suppose others might call it authenticity, but for me, I think when you are a professional who is also married to a person in the profession and is also so passionate about the profession, to think that you have to have different personas is very daunting. And that's my little nugget for people. As they go through their professional life, seek to find the person that you want people to know you to be, and then seek to act in that certain way, and that will become a continuation of your very best self.
And I like the distinction there, because oftentimes people talk about professional legacy, personal legacy, but then you took a step further, which I think is very powerful, that what type of person are you for those two things? And do you have to be a different person? And reevaluate, are you a different person? Are you okay with that? Like understanding that those can merge in the sense that you can still be your authentic self. It's just depending on how you are. I mean, your values should stay the same, I think, across the board. But I think making that distinction, because people often forget that, yes, you can have your own personal and professional goals or kind of elements within that. But if we're two different people, are you okay with that? Because people then tend to not think, or they merge them, and then you're still staying that same, the authentic self. So I think I always try to see connections between things, that when we start splitting them up, and I think that's very powerful to evaluate your own self in terms of what kind of person you are to meet those two areas if you were to separate them.
I think you've made a really good point there. I also think, you know, some of the learning that we do on our management courses and in coaching is not just valuable for work. It really helps you understand yourself better, helps you understand how you might have to modify your behavior with other people in the workplace. But then, you know, if you keep that just for work, you're not bringing that learning into family relationships or into personal relationships or tricky times with friends where they might need you to be, you know, the advisor and the objective person. So I found it very difficult to do this, to compartmentalize my life and my work life. And for me, just having that sense of authenticity was a bit of a release. Really, I would say it felt very much like I was giving myself freedoms to learn from all sides of my life and to create this more authentic self that you've just mentioned.
Yeah, I love it.
And it's a work in progress, let me tell you. Goodness me.
No. Yeah, for sure. I think it's, and that's real. Like the element of always being, it's always a work in progress, and recognizing that things are adaptable and changing, and recognize what is adaptable and changing and what isn't. Like we had mentioned it, when you have a strong core of values that drive you, in terms of, you even mentioned this early on, in terms of kind of your influence on people. How do you want to be remembered? where do you want to have had influence in that area? Those are the main drivers, and doing it, authentically, but also, honestly, and creating those types of environments. I think those are the main drivers, but recognizing, I think that the last point of it's a work in progress, right? Because it's not that you're always going to have this perfectly figured out, and you might for a day and then realize, let's think about it again, and mix between those two. And I'm sure you, and from this conversation, it seems that this is something you always think about as well.
I think so. I mean, there'll be other examples I'll draw out through the questions, but I would just say, if I could go back and tell my 20-year-old self, what are the top tips? Firstly, I'd say don't fret so much about how you look, because you're never going to look better than this. That would be one of the things. The second thing would be, don't beat yourself up too much. You can always strive to be better, but as you get older, you get this sense of understanding which battles to pick, or understanding which feedback to take deep into your heart and then to allow you to really wound you, and I wish I could have told my younger self that. But then my younger self went through a lot of those little things, and then I've grown into the person I am here today. But if you can do one thing, I think, in life, it's to afford others the opportunity to listen to the advice you've gathered along the way, like giving them, little gems and little jewels.
Yeah. And so generally our next question has been about, your past and present experiences shaping your outlook. But it seems like for you as well, what you just mentioned, you had to experience some of these things to kind of adjust and had that. So when you're looking now at your past and present, are you thinking, because I went through this has kind of shaped, or these different elements that's shaped my outlook? Or is it something that you think that you just had to constantly kind of remind yourself? Like, has it been just through your experiences that this outlook has progressed, or what are your thoughts there?
So I think it's a mixture of all of those things. Really, I think you've just hit several nails on the heads. But let me just take you through the way that we're always coached in our lives is to understand yourself, and then to understand how you react in different situations. So, coming from an Irish family, and having a very big emphasis on storytelling and singing and being very gregarious, I'm generally a very extrovert person, but I'm the eldest of three, and I'm a bit of a people pleaser at the same time. And this, sometimes you're people's cup of tea and sometimes you're not. I don't know if you know that phrase, but sometimes you can just rub people up the wrong way. And I always seemed, during my years, perhaps early years and also teen years, to always focus on the people that I wasn't quite gelling with, rather than thinking about the majority of people who I loved to be with and they loved me. I always kind of focused on, oh, I'm not making that person like me or whatever. And I used to take that feedback very much to heart. And over the years, I've really understood that take it to heart when it's really true, and don't be shy of that. So, when somebody tells you you're too much, or you're too much of this, or you're too much of that, that has been said in many, many events, but you're too bright and you're too noisy and you're too gregarious, you've got to really think, am I really bad because of those attributes? And I would say that's one of my top tips as well. Don't take everything to heart, judge it very objectively. So there's that, understanding yourself, and then there's the understanding how you can possibly react to things in different ways. So you can build this more objective approach, or you can understand that in the work setting, you're not going to be popular all the time with all the people. And as long as you pick your battles appropriately, that's fine, if it's for the greater good, or if somebody has behaved badly and you need to challenge them. And those things along the way have really helped me. I've been told, I've got a big, strong character, and you can be a little bit noisy and you can be too much of this. But actually, the good coach would tell me how to use those attributes to my strengths, not tell me that I was bad because of them. And that's something I think that we should be endeavoring to nurture people with, as well as giving them, some honest feedback when they don't get it quite right. But we should celebrate those diverse characters and not try to force everybody to fit into what the corporate world wants, or what anybody wants, really. And those things have really shaped me. They've really shaped me.
I love that point, to the sense that we're seeing so much of the conversation before that was shifting around, identify what your weaknesses are and try to fill those or focus on those, to now these conversations around, well, what are your strengths? Where do you add to conversations or contributions or whatever it is, and highlight those. And like you had mentioned, reposition them in places where you can focus more on that power. And it's not necessarily a weakness if someone doesn't like you, but we focus on the negatives where we think that that is someone that we need, or something that we need to give our attention to, where we realize we have all these gifts and all of these other elements that when we use them can have a much more positive impact than focusing on what we quote unquote might consider a negative, whether it be an interaction or a specific trait. So I think that's also very interesting, because we're seeing a shift in those types of conversation to recognize what your weaknesses are, because we all have them, but also recognize where you can contribute your strengths. And so how do you take those types of attributes, like you had mentioned, and you had said this, to then positively impact, right? So to kind of move beyond that. So I really like that. So of course, we cannot talk about successes or elements of one's career without talking about failures or challenges. Would you care to share, and you don't have to be that specific, but really on the topic of just kind of failures and challenges you've experienced and how you've either overcome them or think about them?
So, Rola, I'm delighted to share this, because, on the outside, as chief exec of the International Pharmaceutical Federation, as somebody who has a PhD and has, several honours and fellowships, it looks to the outside world that, oh my goodness, she's just been successful all the way. And I just want to reflect back that I was the first of 3 children in our family, and there was I'm the first grandchild in my mother's family, and we're the last grandchildren in my dad's family. And a lot of focus was put on me. I was a very high achiever from an early age, but I was going towards medicine. That was one of the routes that my school would direct you in if you were good at science and you were quite smart. And I didn't get my exams. And this was a major tragedy for my family. I didn't get the grades. So I took a year out to retake, and it was a really big deal in the family at this time. And I would say that year out was the best thing that happened to me, because although I am a pharmacist, I'm very proud to be a pharmacist, the whole of my degree didn't quite suit me as a natural affinity. I probably would have suited something more English derived or law or something like that. But you know what? My retake year was a really good reset year, and the teaching I had there was unbelievable. And it kind of taught me to be a little bit more humble about things and to understand that failure is around the corner. And I didn't get through my degree without a couple of exam failures along the way. And people have been quite shocked about that. They've been like, oh my God, do you like talking about that? And I'm saying, yeah, because, that's like the route map at the beginning. If you were to plot them out from me at 18, 19, it didn't look that great at that moment in time. And here I am several decades later. And, hey, she's done it. She's done well. So we shouldn't think of failures as being the end point. We should think of as failures as being an opportunity to restart and regroup. And, I also think my career path, I probably put more barriers in the way of my smooth success and my smooth trajectory because of some of the decisions I made about wanting to do a part-time PhD, or actually a PhD in a certain area, which meant I had to work at the same time. So suddenly, the timescales around PhD were lengthened, and that gave me this whole opportunity to work across sectors and to achieve my PhD, and it was very patient-centered. And again, that was partly the making of me. That partly, taught me to multitask and to work on my own, work in a team, switch modes, and really to strive to achieve things. I would say some of my success has been as a direct result of what could be deemed failure. And that would be another little gem I'd like to leave people. Failures, they can be solved. They really can. You can really grow out of them. I didn't feel like that at the time. I felt a lot of family pressure, and I felt a lot of individual pressure and a lot of soul searching around these things. But, with the passage of time and understanding that others go through so much worse and much more challenging times, I think it's It's part of the mosaic that ends up being your identity.
Yeah. And as you're talking, I kind of quickly thought that within the conversation, saying failure as the opportunity, because you basically then now begin to question, what is the opportunity in this? What am I learning? And I think that repositions it in such a different light, right? Because if you're saying that 1 year you learned so much and then it kind of got you in a mindset where it's just, okay, this didn't work out, but there was so much opportunity there elsewhere, which then added to that, which is amazing. Now, when you're thinking also about the future, what excites you? What are you really looking forward to? It can be for you personally, it can be for the profession, it can be for the world.
Well, you see, I mentioned to you earlier on that I feel very blessed to have got through this last year and to be in the position I'm in and to be able to afford opportunities. So some of the things that we've been doing at FIP to really think about changing the model have come about as a direct result of the pandemic. And my excitement now is just that the digital events arena, whilst it shouldn't be the sole way that we communicate and interact, and goodness me, really, you and I, we need that person-to-person contact. But you know what it's done for FIP is it's included so many more people, and it's been an equity opportunity. And these things are so important. I think we will re-look at all of our face-to-face events, and these will be opportunities on top of a digital platform. And it's also given us the opportunity to publish things and then to have to talk about them in a different way, because you haven't got the event launch thing, you've got to be much more interactive. So whilst that might feel exhausting at the time, actually, I think it's super exciting. So we developed and published 21 development goals that unite the whole of our organisation: science, practice, workforce and education. And we relaunched our Global Pharmaceutical Observatory, which we've had in place for a long time, but it's focused pretty much on practice and workforce. And now it's going to be the evidence base for impact across the profession. And we're just launching our global platform for partnerships and provisions, where you've got the members who have the needs. They're going to be able to be matched up with the providers who have the stuff that they need, and we can put a little quality assurance mark on it. And then, you know what, when you start to say by 2023 we need to demonstrate impact across the globe of X, Y and Z, well, we've got a mechanism, because those member organizations don't have to start from scratch. They can start from a position of success. And actually we've done a lot of that, and we've done a lot of that without all of the face-to-face meetings. So now I'm thinking, when we come out of this, we've got the opportunity for face-to-face to add to that. But in addition, we've got such a good platform to spring from, because there are some things in place now that can't be undone. So for me, I think, again, it's about silver linings, isn't it? It's about, we've been stuck in lockdown and at home for so long. You can look at it in two ways. And I really had to, through the dark days of the beginning of this year, stuck in the UK, I really had to think, how am I going to keep myself motivated? So I'm thinking now, because it's been long enough for us to make some of those changes permanent, this is the opportunity that excites me for the next 1, 3, 5, 10 years of global pharmacy. And the profession has done us proud in the pandemic. You know, quite a risk-averse profession who doesn't shout, not necessarily always remembered by the government ministers when they stand up and talk about doctors and nurses. They don't say, and pharmacists, the third largest profession, but we've really shone in the pandemic. Our frontline pharmacists have just been epic, and that excites me. That excites me, because we are on the map.
I love it. And you brought up a wonderful point, which I think is definitely a silver lining during this time, is breaking down those barriers, because even kind of the access to information within that regards. I mean, I've followed FIP just within my career for so long, and you know, I know the quality of work and reports and everything that's been put out there, but obviously, like many other organizations, kind of they've ramped up, you know, there's the amount of information that's out there, not just to, you know, that just occurred during this year, but to really try to bring together the different stakeholders to set those roots in different areas. And like you mentioned, so that as we move forward, we move forward together stronger. We have a plan, we understand that. And I think that's so exciting, just looking at the different organizations that are working on different things, kind of this collective thing, because many of them, this is not new to them in terms of the work that they're doing, but the ability to, like you said, step up and say, this is what we can provide, this is what we can do, I think is so exciting, because people are willing to work together a lot more than before. So those that have that in their culture, as you would say, in terms of their organizations, have really shined as well. So there is that. So let's just talk a little bit about success and creating environments for success, especially in a case like this where you're working on so many different initiatives, and the initiatives are very big, the mission is very big, the goals are very big. How do you, on a smaller scale first, how do you personally define success?
Oh, that's like a super tricky one, isn't it? Because I think it comes to that, you know, the things we were talking about at the very beginning. So professionally, of course, my success is defined about, have I delivered against my KPIs? Have I delivered the Federation's vision? Have I enabled the delivery via all of the routes? But, you know, personally, and I touched on this earlier on, I think I've got some personal measures of success. And it does play into that starting point, which is about being a bit of a people pleaser, because, you know, I want to feel good because I'm pleasing people, and actually personal success is all about what makes you feel good, but in an objective way. So my feeling is, how do I want people to feel when I enter a room and when I leave a room, and what can I do to enable that, and how can I handle myself in such a way that they're going to remember me for that, you know, that impact. And I think that is a little bit legacy, you know, like we started out with, but I do think it's a success. And I think that purposeful thinking it through, whether it's about making a couple of notes that you can, you know, summarize something up, or you can make an active contribution that's factual and sensible, but also has that little bit of humor, or that little bit of a, you know, generous spirit, the little bit of you in it. I think that's another thing that I wish I could have told myself years ago, and that it is successful to leave people feeling good and feeling that you've added to the room. And also the other point is that success sometimes is about what you don't say as well as what you do say. And for a chatterbox like me, that's taken me decades and decades to know when, you know, there's a moment in time just to say nothing, that silence is also a very good successful tool. My final point, I think, in this one is success can also be about constantly learning and constantly striving to deliver well, and also to get that delivery across other parts of your life. And that's another thing that's taken me quite some time. So I would always, if I was mentoring someone, say, if you were training in a gym and you only focused on your biceps, then your back's going to be out and your glutes are going to be weak. You're just going to be weaker. You're going to have one strong muscle. So if you focus on success in work only, that doesn't mean you're going to be successful in your life. So you have to define these domains of family, friends, exercise, self, you know, things that define you as an individual. It could be very private, and then think about where you are on those, and then think about what you can do to nurture the fully rounded person that you are. And that's also a sign of success, I think. And that gives you that sense that you can possibly understand your team and understand the personal elements of the other people that you work with, or the other organizations that you work with as well. So I am very people-centered, you know. I know that, and that is a weakness, but as we said, turn it into a strength. You know, if you're intrigued about people, then always be a bit people-centered and seek to make them feel good about themselves, and seek to make you super in that role. Yeah.
I like it. Defining domains, and then defining the metrics by which you have defined your own that. You had mentioned that you are very people-centric. You think about those that are around you when you enter a room, how you make them feel. We know also that our own success isn't just dependent on us. We talk a lot about environments and creating your environment for success. So how do you create your environment for success? How do you think about the actions kind of beyond you personally, but in that creative environment?
So the top secret of being a CEO is not to be the expert of everything. I think there's a really good phrase really that we need to always remember. Just remember, you can do anything, but you can't do everything. And if we all thought that through, then it's not a failure to share out the things that need to be done, because you're guaranteeing yourself more that you're going to be successful. So I think when you're thinking about managing a team, you have to understand yourself and how you can bring out the best in that team, as well as also, you know, simply sometimes just tell them what needs to be done and make an expectation, because that's also important. But then if you work in an organization like a federation, like FIP, you rely a lot on volunteers, you rely a lot on people who have their own passions and their own raison d'etre, the reason why they really are passionate about the profession. So you have to almost make sure that the goals of the federation are broad enough that they have a place in the big federation house that is FIP. And I think, of course, I have to deliver some elements myself. I have to be seen to deliver some myself. But if you're quite an extrovert, there's a real skill here in becoming a mirror for those that are shining, that you reflect that back to them. They feel great, but also that you become brighter as a result of other people's success. And that generosity of spirit comes from either a very innate, intuitive individual, or somebody who's just got a bit of maturity about them that understands they don't have to have been in charge of every single element and every single dot and cross on a document. You know, it's about sharing it out. And at FIP, it really is. And this last year, honestly, we've really had to shine a light on what's amazing, showcase excellence, really be a conduit for people who have been doing unbelievable things. But you know, that makes me feel great. So I'm winning, they're winning, and the profession's winning because they're seeing it. And the ultimate thing is the patients at the end of it and the public are getting the best care they possibly can. So it's that little virtuous circle I think you need to create for yourself.
Yeah, it's definitely, and I'm going to echo that, it's definitely a great feeling to be able to, you know, be that mirror, to be able to allow those people that have been doing amazing things to continue to shine, because truly, when they're successful, if you think of it as a collective hold, when things are moving and progressing forward, we all kind of win with that. You did mention that famous kind of thought process with regards to you can do anything, but you can't do everything. That gets us to the question around support and asking for support. I know many of us kind of, especially women, struggle to ask for support because they worry that it shows a sign of weakness, or that they might not be able to know, or, you know, that they don't know what they're doing. Is there a specific strategy that you use when you ask for support?
Yeah, I think that's a really true fear. I think we need to name it and we need to observe it. And it comes from all sorts of parts of our individual experience, but also what we've seen. And, you know, you'll see it in everyday life that, yeah, it's hard to lead, full stop, but it's super hard to lead as a woman. It just is. And, you know, Ruda's, you know, as well as I do, women can be women's worst critics as well. So my advice to someone who would be in a position where they're not used to sharing the load or asking for help or delegating, and I think delegating is a really key thing here, is that I would always give tasks. I would always keep tasks that I can demonstrate success with. And I would always identify the tasks that others can do better. And then I'd look for some of the ones that sit in the middle, where I might have to do a bit of collaboration with a member of the team or whatever. So what I do is I get rid of the things that could make me look more like a failure, because others can do them better. And in doing so, I'm also shining a light on their capabilities. I'm actually guaranteeing myself some success because I understand myself and I understand what I can do really well. And then I'm able to work as a team player, because that's the other thing I would just say. My psychology is not just to be a leader, but I love being part of a team. I love it. I love it. I find, you know, the thing about the pandemic, working on your own, I have to be in front of my screen all the time because I need that engagement, and it's not quite the same, is it? But that would be my top tip. That would be my top tip. Don't try and do it all. Do the things you know you can do really well, really quickly, and really successfully. That'll make you feel great. Give away the stuff that you can't do so well, but give it to those who've got the skill set, and praise and praise and praise them, and then share the others out, and do some sleeve rolling, and, you know, get together with the team to deliver it. Once you've done that once or twice, you develop that as a tactic, and, you know, you have to build in some time to delegate properly. That's the key thing. It takes longer. It takes longer than you think. And then what happens as a risk, of course, I haven't had this experience, Rina, I have, is that you leave it to such a stage in the timescale for delivery that you end up doing it yourself, because you think it's easier to do it myself, and you put yourself under so much pressure that it's hateful, it's awful, and you may deliver it, but you've had no sleep for a week or whatever. And that's a little top sharing thing. You really just need to plan a little bit ahead of time.
Yeah. I like, because it also builds on what you've been saying. So the first one, we've also been talking about identifying your strengths and leveraging them, identifying your weakness, but making it an opportunity for someone else. And that allows that. So again, that whole negative turned to positive because it gave it actually an opportunity for someone else to shine and excel with that, with ultimately benefits everybody, and especially whatever initiative that you're on. That element of the third one, whereas there's still going to be elements where there's collaboration. So having those skills and understanding that always at different capacities, it's still going to be a skill that you're going to need to have in terms of understanding teams and working with people, because there's always going to be that third element there, which is really nice. Now let's talk about leadership, which is something that we talk about a lot in this series. So I asked you the question is prior to the event is, how would you describe a leader, excuse me? And then you responded with, the reason why it can be difficult to describe a leader is that it is often so difficult to be a leader. A good leader is one who can set a clear path ahead and bring their team alongside to advise, support, and ensure everyone is on board, even when that path changes directions. A good leader is one who can do this with the charm, humility, and clarity, and who learns along the way. Learning to be a leader, and a good leader at that, is a lifelong endeavor that never ends. Can you elaborate a little bit more on this, or is there anything that specifically, you'd mentioned different elements, but anything that's kind of shaped this outlook for you?
So really, you know, there's the whole debate when you start looking at the leadership literature that says, is a leader born or are they made? And, you know, are some people innate leaders and some people not? And then often, if you're the extrovert person, you get identified as a leader, and then all those expectations land on you, and then you end up with the very irritated introvert who could be a better leader, but nobody spotted them because they weren't as noisy as the hand-waving extrovert in the corner. So leadership is just fraught with problems, and it is difficult. And I would just say that it's difficult to lead well. It's difficult to lead in the way that you might like all the time. And sometimes you have to tell people what to do as a leader, even, and that they have to understand that. So I would also add in there that good leadership is dependent on good followership. And there's a responsibility for those that are being led in a team to take some responsibility for their followership as well. Now, I'll just say it to you that the last year has really given me such clarity over this, because the ability to handle a change in direction, pause, reflect, communicate, tell everybody what's happening, tell everybody when you might be able to tell them more, and then to pause, reflect a bit more, and to be able to bring everybody with you along that way. And you and I talked about this in the previous interview we had about vaccination. That's good leadership. The end point is less of an issue than the journey of leadership. And I think we see this in lots of different leaders. So in the UK, different countries' leaders are faring differently with their country people, even though the outcomes of the patient population and the death rates and all of these things may not be that different. And it's all about how they feel they've been led through the process. And that's something I think, you know, when we said measures of success, as a leader, you are measured by KPIs, and you are measured by, you know, did you bring in the money? Did you do the thing? Did you do the thing? How, you know, is the business or the federation or the corporation successful, viable, you know, alive? But very often what makes a leader better than average is how they make the organization and their team feel along the journey. And that's something I've been so intrigued by in the last year in particular. And it's given me a real mirror myself to reflect on my leadership style, and perhaps even to hone that down. Things I found very difficult. I find it very difficult to be directive. That might astound you, but I find it very difficult to go, no, this is just what we're going to do. But I've had to do that this year. And I've realized that if you have to do it, you have to do it. And don't worry about that, because the rest of your leadership style is fine and you're thinking about the other people, but they need to think about you and the federation, and they need to be responsible for that as well. And I've really learned that. As long as I try and do it in my most charming, humble way, but every now and then it's my job, and I just have to say, okay, you need to do this and we need to do that, and that needs to be done by then. Yeah,
it's that element of like describing, like you said, within the past year or two, of when a leader has had to kind of shift because and take those pauses, which maybe many leaders, some have not had to take those types of pauses, and focus on that human element of their leadership, like you'd mentioned, and understanding kind of the psychology of it, where people are tired and people might not, you know, be at that same stage of, you know, thinking about the mission and the vision in a different light. And so understanding where you delegate and what types of decisions need to be made in order to move the team forward, and still have that human element side to it, I think is a big part, like you had mentioned, in terms of the year of the pandemic and what that has really, you know, taught many of us. I think some of the best leaders that you keep hearing about did have those human sides of just, you know, spending time meetings, thinking, you know, asking and genuinely concerned about how are you, how is it going, how do we support each other? And I think that's very powerful as well.
Now, when you come out of this, Rola, just to jump in there and step all over your schedule, but when you come out of this, you might reflect on the amazing series you're pulling together here, on the fact that a lot of those traits are innate to women leaders. They don't follow a script. And very often just imagine this act that, you know, when a child is upset, you get down on your hunkers, you know, you get down to their level and you ask them a question to find out exactly what's wrong. And I've often heard that what we don't have the opportunity to do today is that if I needed to find out what was wrong, I should come around the table and sit beside you. And we don't have that opportunity on Zoom. So you even have to stretch the caring side of your human leadership qualities even further on Zoom, because we don't have that natural interaction where I could just, you know, bend down to have a chat with you or just check in. Are you okay? Like you would do if you were pouring the coffee in the corner of a room. You just go, are you doing okay? And the sense that people may be stressed for all sorts of reasons, whether it's in work, out of work, or with the job, or with the globalness of this pandemic or personal tragedy, means that your 17 senses are constantly alert. And that is what has led to good leadership in the pandemic. That's a thesis to be argued about, but that's one thing that women can contribute highly to this leadership debate. And I commend you on having this series about women leaders, because we always worry about how hard is it to be a woman leader? Oh my God, it's so hard. Oh my God, look, it's so hard. Some things we ace them, Rola, and the pandemic has shown that women leaders have done well.
Great, thank you for that. Okay, so we have so our audience members vary at different stages of their career. We have some that are students all the way to top executives and are later on in their career. Just as general leadership advice or lessons that you would like to leave the audience members at varying stages of their careers, both men and women, as we wrap up the topic on leadership?
I think use every opportunity that you're in as a reflection on how either you could learn from it to build your own resilience, but also how you might have led it in a different way and also to reflect on what you're seeing in front of you as what's good about that leader's style, and almost become a little magpie where you can pick little gems from things. I mean, I've been dropping gems throughout the whole of the interview, Rola, and I hope they're of value to some people. They will be to some, they won't be to everybody. But you know, also when you're in a meeting, think, wow, I really like that way of approaching a difficult question, or I really love the way that they've listened to everybody, but they've actually decanted it into or distilled it into a tiny little nugget of next steps. And using every encounter as a learning opportunity means you don't have that desperate anxiety to showcase yourself as an emerging leader, which I think is it's an unsaid anxiety that many feel. If you're early in your career, you are under pressure to kind of show yourself to be a good leader and to shine and to stand out from the crowd. And then when you're, you know, when you're senior, you've got to make your points to show that you've still got lots to say and lots to learn. And sometimes pausing, reflecting, says she, the biggest chatterbox in the room, but pausing and reflecting and thinking, where would I add value to on this conversation? Or I really love the way that they're handling themselves with that note to self, is the best contribution you can be making to your own development and to that of others. And I think that leadership is a shared endeavor. Sometimes you need to be a good follower, and sometimes you need to step up. And sometimes a good leader will ask the followers to step up at a certain point, and maybe they need to offer to step up and lead something and see that as an opportunity rather than as a delegation. And that would be an opportunity for many earlier in their careers. But I think the whole idea that leadership should be about one person rather than, you know, that diffuse leadership model where everybody signs up to the same values as much as they can, and we all take our responsibilities with this, is possibly something we've all seen is needed in the last year, if we didn't know it before. And I'm actually seeing it a lot in teams I work with and volunteers I work with, and in our communities, you know, people stepping up and just doing stuff that is good, and then they're regarded as a leader. Yeah, I think just make it as a set of opportunities on the path that you're on, rather than something you should strive to be.
The opportunities to learn for yourself and the opportunities of where you can add value, which I think is very powerful to what you had said, for sure. Now, the last question before we go, we don't have a lot of time for Q&A, but we do have a question. But the last question we ask, and we ask this to all of our guest leaders, is that we like to take the time to, and this opportunity to support one another and recognize the positive influence we have on one another. Can you name a woman who has inspired you, and why did you choose this person?
So I'm sorry, I can't name one. I've got to name three very quickly. Okay,
even better.
One is professional. Now I've got so many leaders who are my dear friends, but one in my profession is Carmen Pena, who was the first female president, and she was responsible for my appointment. And I look at, you know, she was the first female president in her own country's federation, and then at FIP. And she really kind of laid the stones for me to follow as the first female CEO. A second personal one would be my mum. When I was thinking about, we have Mother's Day in the UK mid-March, and I wasn't with my mum on Mother's Day. And we've missed so many family opportunities, haven't we all, this year? And I think about how strong my mum is. She was an immigrant from Ireland, and she always strove and worked hard, and she's a nurse. And she, although, you know, she held me to a very high account, hence failing my A-levels was not great, but she always believes that I can do anything I put my mind to, which is, it's daunting and amazing. And she's like my biggest champion. Yeah, a very strong and amazing woman. And the third person, I just thought, Rola, this was just worth mentioning, is a woman called Rosalind Franklin. I don't know if you know this, but this for me is a real issue about equity and recognition. So she was born in the 20s and she died in the late 50s. She was an English chemist. So of course she's in science, and I'm inspired by that. And her work was essential to the structure of DNA, RNA, and she worked on viruses and graphite. What a range. And of course, in her lifetime, she was known for viruses and for her research in that, which is very important for today. but her contributions to the structure of DNA were only recognised after her death. And I just wanted to make a note of that in our stories about great women leaders, that sometimes people aren't regarded as great leaders in their time. It was a different time. It really was. You know, the authors of papers tended to be men, and we understand that. But, you know, we shouldn't let anybody pass us by in our professional journeys without recognising their contributions while they live.
I really like that. Very nice. So we do have some questions, but we just have time for one. And this question, I think, is a theme that has come up frequently with regards to having conversations either with people that have diverse backgrounds and might not see a perspective the way you do, or maybe might not think about an issue the same way you do. Any advice that you can provide when you're trying to speak to somebody that has a very opposing view as you, or maybe you're just, you know, it just might seem very polarized, and kind of how to move forward with that?
It's a really important thing, isn't it? Because I think at the moment in our societies, we are being more and more pushed into having polarized views. So how to handle this is really important. So I think it's important that you lay out what you think, but in a very objective way. And then you also repeat what you've seen or what you've heard from the other person, so they understand you've listened to them. So if you and I were talking about, I don't know, vaccines and whether we should have them or not, and you agreed with having a vaccine and I don't, then you might find that very difficult, as we all would. So if you lay out your reasons for why you agree with this, but also what I've heard is, I'm interested, Catherine, in understanding why you said that and why you might believe that. And then you open the opportunity for a dialogue. It doesn't mean that you're going to have to change your view. It just means that you've opened this opportunity and that you've ensured that that person knows they've been heard. And I mean, we have this at the moment so much. You know, UK has just left Europe. We had a binary vote in 2016, and it's kind of put half the country against half the country. You're either a leaver or a remainer or a Ramona. And nobody really takes the time then to find out what were your reasons for the votes. We think we know, we think we understand. And, you know, politics is like that very often. I know in the US, you vote for one candidate for president or another. So you're either in one camp or the other. And these things, we just need to pause, reflect, and understand. And even if we don't understand why somebody may have voted in a certain way or believe a certain thing or have a certain view, having the opportunity to demonstrate to them that you've listened and you've heard, and that actually you can act with charm and humility, like we said, and you can still say, well, you know, I'm still on the other side to your perspective, but I'm really happy that we've had this conversation, can lead it to an end point that's calmer. I don't know whether those have been good examples to give, but that's kind of handling tricky situations is a constant development opportunity. And it's how you decide that you want to come across that is your big guiding light. That would be my top tip.
Yeah. Yeah, because we often think so much about the argument that we're going to make or the points that we're going to make. And oftentimes people don't trust until they feel heard, which is, I think, a message that you really clearly articulated as well, is that, you know, spend time to have the other person first feel heard before you're trying to make your own case, because they will not trust you or even hear you if they don't even feel heard as well. And so I think that's really powerful there as well. So we're about time. Is there any other final thoughts or closing remarks that you'd like to make?
My
Please,
add-on
yes.
sentence to that last point that you said, that if you can think that, and you know, bear in mind I come from this very extrovert, noisy family, if you can think that you know your views and that your job is to hear the other person's views, then it gives you that freedom not to have to explain everything. They may ask you for your views back, or you might do a cheeky question like, are you interested in what I'm thinking? Which is always a nice little, you know, ha ha ha, I'm getting my own back. But they may just want to be heard, and then you're not going to influence them anyway. They just want to tell you. And I think, Rola, that's sometimes good to know. Sometimes you can't change people's minds. You just can't.
Mm-hmm. And even it goes back to your previous conversation about the two elements of the opportunity to learn. So even for yourself going in, and then the opportunity to add value or change your perspective. So those are two very, very powerful. And when you do that in that order, it reiterates the part about the listening and then
Yeah.
about where you can add to this conversation or the element. So that is wonderful. So any other final thoughts
No,
or
you've just
comments?
been an amazing host, an amazing interviewer, and I must say I've enjoyed this as much, if not more, than last time. And you've brought out so many thoughts and insights into me that from me that I didn't even know I had. Thank you so much.
No, thank you for such an authentic conversation. I feel like that, I think so much of it is kind of understanding not only our strengths, as we had mentioned, but the ability to kind of quickly adapt and learn from that. And I think that takes a lot of, you know, honesty and humility within that. So thank you so much for that, because this has been such an honest conversation. I feel like it's definitely motivating in the sense that we're all human and we're all learning. And like you're saying, it's constantly adapting, and you can still leave a great legacy and be successful however it is, as a constant process. So on behalf of Salus Vitae Group and myself, I would like to thank you again for joining us today and for sharing your experiences. There are so many points to take through, but definitely the opportunity and willingness to be generous, to be humble, to learn, and to turn the negatives into opportunities for learning and impact. So we have several exceptional leaders in the coming weeks, so please visit us at salusvitaegroup.com to learn more and register for the upcoming events. So thank you all for joining us, and we hope to see you at the next event. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you so much.